So this year, obviously, I did a few Sky Sports F1s. I watched those, the first one back from that, because I wasn't happy with how I did it. I've been made aware of some sort of attempts to kind of stop me from progressing up the ladder.
From people within the industry?
Yeah, and then I had a bit of a spicy question for Fernando Alonso, biting off more than I could chew at that stage. Overconfident. And I was asking him, I wanted his opinion on...
Hi, I'm Mark Priestley. I spent 10 years working at the McLaren Formula One team with the likes of Lewis Hamilton, Kimi Räikkönen, Fernando Alonso, Mika Häkkinen. But those are just the drivers. I also worked with amazing people behind the scenes. Adrian Newey, Ron Dennis. They all taught me valuable lessons that I now know are not just applicable to Formula One. My mission with this podcast is to help you to think more like a Formula One team might think about the challenges you might face in life, on a personal level, on a business level, being a parent, social challenges that you face. I hope you'll take away some valuable lessons that will help you on your own journey towards high performance. Welcome to Pitlane Life Lessons. On this week's episode, I've got Harry Benjamin. He's a Formula One commentator, someone I work with on a regular basis. It's an absolute pleasure to be alongside inside a commentary box. But today, he gives us some advice from his journey from, believe it or not, the world of acting and drama into becoming one of Formula One's most prominent figures behind the microphone. There is lots of advice that I think you will be able to take into whatever world it is you operate in. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. Welcome to Pitlane Life Lessons. Harry, you are, I think it's fair to say, a relative newcomer into the world of Formula One, and there'll be people at home that may even not have discovered what you do. So we're going to talk about that. But just to help people out, I Googled you.
Oh, no.
Do you know what comes up?
I do.
I'll just tell everybody. A German endocrinologist and sexologist, born in 1885.
Lived till over 100 though, so here's hoping we've got the same course of a lifespan. But yeah, I don't know who to call about that. I don't know how you sort of jump up the queue on that one, because I think I'm like 4 clicks down on that.
Yeah, but the point is you're now working on jumping up that queue, so that's what we're going to talk about today. So for those who have stumbled across this particular sexologist born in 1885, who's the you version of Harry Benjamin?
Not a sexologist. I suppose I'm a broadcaster in Formula One. I'm an F1 commentator. I read fairly recently. Before that, I'd probably describe myself as a motorsport broadcaster. I did lots of other sort of GTs and lower league kind of Formula single seaters. But yeah, I like to describe myself as a TV and radio broadcaster.
But the amazing part of that is you're only 27 years old.
Yeah.
Right? So that's very young to have broken into this industry. Prior to that, it's interesting, we're talking about your journey, but it's quite a short journey. So before getting into motorsport and Formula One, what was it before then? Because you definitely reached a fork in the road where you had to make a decision, and motorsport was one of those forks. What was the other one?
Yeah, a lot of people say, you've done it very quickly, but it doesn't felt quick for me. I appreciate, when it happens, it happened straight away, which was obviously great. But I've been working at it since I was maybe 17 years old from school, simply starting out by writing a blog at school. They encouraged us to do an extracurricular thing which would look good on university applications, write a blog on anything you want. And I just started talking about motorsport, not even just Formula One. I just the niche bits of Formula One, because I was like, what's the point in writing about the mainstream things? No one's going to read those because they're already being done by the BBCs and the Skies of this world. So I'll do the really niche stuff. And then I think the World Endurance Championship was just starting to get big again around then. And so DTM was there. Formula E was just starting. So I just was watching all of those, getting involved with that and writing, realized I wasn't that good at writing. I was better at talking. And because I wrote how I spoke, which is not good writing sometimes.
Well, sometimes it is.
Well, sometimes I think if you're a stickler for language, it doesn't always.
Your teachers
come across.
probably wouldn't.
Yeah.
Think so,
and I've thought it's quicker to talk rather than to sit down and type all this. So then I was like, I'm not going to be a written journalist, and I wanted to be in the world of motorsport. But at the same time, I was also really into drama and acting. And I wanted to pursue that as my career. So I wasn't going to go to university once I finished school. I wanted to go to drama school. And so when I was 17, 18 and in sixth form, rather than making UCAT applications, I was learning my Shakespeare and my contemporary monologue and having a backup song just in case they asked for one, getting ready to go around to, I think I auditioned for 12 drama schools. And for anyone who doesn't know, it's so competitive.
Yeah.
You know, a course is like 20 to 30 people on there. And, you know, they don't take many people fresh out of school. But I was a bit naive. I was like, yeah, I'll get in. I'm pretty decent. You know?
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with the show, but we always get people to sing their backup song at this stage in the interview.
So mine is A Man for All Seasons by Robbie Williams. Some may know that as the Johnny English theme tune. It's a great song. I'll spare you it now. Okay. But I think I still know my Shakespeare monologue. It was a piece from King John, Philip the Bastard, which is not a swear because that's his character name. Anyway, did all that, went through all the ringer, didn't get into any drama schools, basically. Got offered a foundation course at one called RADA, which stands for the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, which my friends always rib me for because RADA's a pretty good one to go to.
Pretty big, yeah.
So I was obviously over the moon, and even though it was just a foundation, I thought, great. And so I kind of forgot about motorsport at that point, and I went down the drama school route. I still loved enjoying Formula One and Formula E, and I watched all of it. And I went to drama school, and a week in, I realised, no, this is not
that quick.
Not for me. I just knew. I just had a feeling that I loved it and I enjoyed it, but I just knew that the next logical stage of this was to do this course and then go and do 3 years of drama school, finish that, and then you get an agent, and then you become a working actor, hopefully. And I just had so many other vested interests. I still had the motorsport thing bubbling in the background. I loved radio and TV, and I wanted to kind of be an actor and a broadcaster. Yeah. And at drama school, you've got to be all in, which is completely fair enough because it is such an intense training, but you've got to be all in. And I knew straight away that I wasn't. And so I got the most out of it I could. And actually, I feel like because I knew that I didn't want to proceed onwards to a 3-year course at the end of that year, I think I actually got more out of that course than anybody else. Yeah. Because I wasn't worried about trying to impress people to get onto the 3-year course or worrying what implications that could have. I could just sit back and enjoy it all. And I would say to anybody, if you can, do some sort of drama course because it's so good for your life skills. And I learned so much from a green 18-year-old suddenly mixing with a class of 20 to 30 from 18 to 35 years old, all in completely different parts of their own lives, from different areas of the world. Yeah. You learn and you grow up very quickly. But for me, I realized one week in, no, I'll enjoy it. But then after that, I want to go to university and have the ability to get involved with student radio and to do other things.
I mean, sometimes you do need to try something to find out you don't want to do it. And that's what then sets your path, right? So it's not that it was a failure or a bad decision. It was probably a very good decision because without taking that course, you may never have known and you might still be chasing that dream. But all the way through, you were a fan of motorsport. So that was a passion running underneath all of this, right? Yep. So you just said, when I asked you to introduce who you were, you announced the fact you're an F1 commentator.
Well, it's kind of cool.
It is cool. So that's what I was going to say. How's that feel now? Back then, you were a kid dreaming of motorsport, not even maybe Formula One. You've now just announced yourself as an F1 commentator.
It's so funny, though. There's an interview that I did during COVID, I think, so 2020, chatting to Crofty. And I remember saying to him something along the lines of, I don't know how you do it. I could never. Because I just never saw myself as a commentator. I wanted to work in the broadcasting space, but I thought, how on earth do they talk through the first lap? What if there's a 2-hour red flag? How are they coming up with these things? It was just, I thought, no, I could never do that. Absolutely not. It's too difficult. And lo and behold, look what happened. And so maybe I was a bit naive in sort of writing it off straight away as within sort of the F1 broadcasting world, there's obviously certain roles, they all differ. And I was like, no, I don't want to be the commentator. It's too difficult. And it is a hard job. Yeah. And I can attest to that now. But I'm really proud of where I've got to so far. And I am now of the feeling if it all came to an end at the end of the year, fine, because I got this far and I'll take that and run.
Mate, you're doing incredibly well. For those who don't know, Harry and I often commentate together for the BBC.
You were actually my first ever Formula One commentary, 2022, for the BBC Radio 5 Live, the Australian Grand Prix.
That was your first ever?
First ever commentary.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't think I'm getting that wrong. With Mark Priestley as my co-com.
What a privilege.
Yeah, and I've still got the clip in my show reel for that one. So it's a good one.
Well, when you had that interview with Crofty, and in your mind you're thinking, how on earth do you go through a 2-hour race just talking non-stop? How do you do it? Because you now do that.
That is a good question. And it's one that's difficult to answer straight away. The main thing is obviously preparation. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm constantly revising for an exam.
You are very well prepared. I have to say, I have no room on the commentary desk because your notes are everywhere.
I do take a bit of room, yeah. You know what? That's purely a bit of a safety blanket because I'm not scouring them throughout a broadcast. You know, I'll have the Constructors' Championship in front of me and the Drivers' Championship, which obviously I'll glance down at, and I have a page. I have all the drivers and then all the teams on the other side with notes of what's happened that week and that weekend, so I can quickly flip between the two if I need something. Everything else is there mainly as a bit of a safety net, and if I really need to pluck something out of somewhere, I've got it there. But you know how broadcast works and Formula One, for anyone who watches it on the TV, it's obviously quite fast paced. Things happen quickly. So you don't have the time to look away from the TV and just scour a piece of a note.
Yeah.
However, sometimes the moment arises where you can, for instance, if there's a safety car or a red flag, and most of that stuff that I prepare is if we need something to talk about during a red flag, a lengthy red flag. You know, everyone knows, Spa a few years ago. I mean, it happens, the Japanese Grand Prix in that year, 2022. I did the Japanese Grand Prix. I actually did it for F1 TV. It was me, Jolyon Palmer, and Sam Collins. And it was a big crash at the start. It was pouring with rain. And it was the race where, Max Verstappen was champion, or was he? And no one knew at the end of the race. So absolute nightmare for a commentator to navigate that one. But we had over an hour to fill on that one. But that's when you've got your prep there, but also you kind of have to trust that at the end of the day, we're all fans of Formula One. I just try to imagine like you're down at the pub with your mates having a conversation, trying to engage and keep people entertained, because that's how I feel the job is as a Formula One commentator, is to keep people informed of what's going on, to try and explain what's happening. But the co-commentator, that's sort of, they're more equipped to do that. And then to entertain, because sport is entertainment at the end of the day, and try and keep people gripped. You can't flog a dead horse if a race is completely dull and boring, but there are ways of jazzing it up a bit. We've tried many a time, but it is preparation fundamentally, and being a fan of Formula One, that's what gets you through. So, I prep for a couple of days every race week. It gets easier as time goes by because the base notes are there, but it is all in the prep.
What do you think drives that need for preparation? Is it, you called it safety blanket, so presumably there's a fear in there that you don't want to mess up, so therefore the preparation stops you doing that. How much is that, and how much is continually trying to sort of aim even higher than you might, be better than you were last week, for example?
I think part of it is I can't just rock up on a Friday for FP1. I've got to have done something. So, and news is, we live in a world where...
But sorry, why can't you do that?
Because we live in a world where news breaks all the time, and there's constantly a changing cycle of news and what's going on. But I need to know that Valtteri Bottas finished, 100th in class on his latest cycling venture, because that might be a nice little nugget to throw in for FP1. So even if it's just going looking at their Instagrams or whatever, or... okay, I could maybe wing it a little bit, but you don't want to be there winging it. You want to be, you want to feel confident. And I feel confident knowing that I've done the revision, because, I have to work hard at this job. It's not something that I find comes naturally. I have to work hard at it. There are some commentators I know who are just absolute naturals, and they can rock up, and they have a photographic memory, and they can just do it. I can't do that. I have to work hard at it.
So has that always been a thing for you, in even outside of Formula One or motorsport? Preparation has always been something that's been high up on your kind of priority list?
I wonder, I was always so bad at exams.
Really?
So I've got, well, for maths and science, I've got this thing called dyscalculia, which everyone thinks is made up. It's dyslexia with numbers, basically.
Okay.
It's quite rare. Well, I think it's just not diagnosed that often. So I was always bad at maths and science, but I was bad at exams in general because I didn't know how to revise and I didn't know how to prepare for them. And that's half the battle. If you're at school doing your GCSEs and A levels and stuff, now, if anyone asks me now, the key to it is all in how you revise. I would make copious amounts of notes, but actually, would they go in? I'm just writing from a textbook into my own notepad. Does that go in? It didn't for me. So actually what did it was doing sort of past papers and practice exams. And then the same things crop up over and over again, or slightly differently worded, or the same kind of layout, but just applying a different method. And the more you do it, the more you get into the ebbs and flows of it. And so I think once I kind of unlocked that, I mean, my exams were fine after that. And I think I still use that in today. I do obviously make a lot of notes, but when I first started commentating, I had to practice my own commentary.
Did you?
I would watch old races and I practice how I would commentate something. In every race now, in the build up to the weekend, I'm watching the last 10 years of the Grand Prix of that particular race. Like we got Austin at the time of recording this coming up in a few weeks. I've already started watching, the 2012 Austin race and the first one that happened there. And luckily there's only goes back that far, so there's not too many to watch. And they're quite enjoyable. And just hearing how other people have done things and then trying to figure out how I would do it. But also I quite enjoy watching it as well. So you get a bit of that.
Guys, I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. If you can take a very quick moment to like, subscribe, follow, leave me a comment or a 5-star rating, I would really appreciate it. It makes a massive difference to the podcast. Are you quite analytical with stuff like that in terms of analysing other people's commentary? Do you watch your own stuff back or listen to your own stuff back ever?
I used to when I first started, but I don't anymore. So this year, obviously, I did a few Sky Sports F1s. So I watched the first one back from that, because I wasn't happy with how I did it. So I watched it back and I was like, I could have done that better. And equally, the majority that I do for the radio, I now actively try and find different words to use, trying to find how is the most descriptive way of wording this, because it's all well and good saying Leclerc going down the inside, but is there actually a better way I can make that come to life for a radio audience? So that is part of my prep in the build-up. I will try and think, that's actually quite a nice way of describing DRS and how that works, and just trying to paint a picture more and increase and widen my vocabulary. That's sort of maybe a bit more analytical in the way of thinking when it comes to language.
What about self-critical? I mean, you just said you weren't happy with your first Sky F1 performance. Do you think there was ever a world where you would have been happy, or were you always really self-critical?
I don't think there was ever a world where I would have been happy with that first performance. I don't think I could have done much better either, because for the first Sky one, I felt the pressure.
Yeah.
I felt it. It was in my brain the whole time. I'd never brought the BBC. We broadcast to a bigger audience, but they're not as engaged as Sky F1 fans are, which is also a global audience as well. It's the world feed essentially. And to suddenly be working alongside the people that I'd kind of grown up watching, you've got to reassess your priorities very quickly. You can't go walking in with your eyes wide open, stars in your eyes looking at them. You've got to get on with the job. But I felt the pressure. Social media is a thing now that, Murray Walker didn't have to contend with that. And you've got to sort of learn to kind of phase it out. But equally, of course I read it. If you're going to tag me in it, I'm going to read it. So I'm going to see it. And that all just, I felt the pressure and I felt a weight on me. And the other thing that I wasn't happy with Imola, because the commentary box was so small and I just didn't have the space I felt like I needed. I didn't have the environment to feel like I could perform at my best. Didn't have the space, didn't have exactly my notes where I wanted them, or my laptop was a bit precariously placed. I mean, all that is just absolute minute things. But for me, that meant quite a lot. And I felt like it was always going to be a bit of an uphill battle. I look back on it now and go, it was fine. It was solid.
Yeah.
But I don't think there was a way I would have been happy with that first one.
So let's say you go back to Imola next year and you're commentating for Sky F1. You're in the same tiny little commentary box. If that's a thing for you where it's not big enough, I can't feel comfortable. Have you got a way of, changing your perception? Because nothing about that commentary box will change.
No.
So how are you going to go in next year if it happens, not being hampered by the fact you're in this tiny little commentary box?
Yeah, I'll be a diva and ask them to knock through to the next one. I think it comes down to having a bit more confidence to say what I wanted in that first round. And look, they were brilliant, because they were asking me what screen do I want this on and where do I want it. And sometimes you're not going to get everything you want because you are just working against a space that you can't really operate in. So sometimes you just have to bite your lip and get on with it and perform the best you can, which I think in reality, that's probably what you have to do. I can't, right now, I wouldn't think of a way to be able to find a better placing for that.
No, I mean, I think a lot of it will come down to the fact that you'll have done more of them by then, so your confidence level's generally higher anyway, right?
It's like flying, getting your air miles. The more you do, the more confident you feel.
Yeah.
I mean, I was pretty riding high. In 2022, I did 3 F1 commentaries for the BBC and 1 for F1 TV, and I was I thought they all went pretty well. There was kind of not really too much pressure either. I felt I was eased into it quite nicely. I had great co-commentators. And then I made the step up the following year, sort of around Monaco, Canada time. And it was going okay. And then it got towards the end of that year. And I didn't know what was happening for 2024. And I felt like I was, I felt a bit like Logan Sargent. And I felt like I wasn't really performing very well. And I was down on my own confidence. And that was getting in my head a bit. And I felt like I was messing up easy things and getting my words muddled, and that was happening a few races in a row, and I just really felt like I'm struggling to keep hold of this seat here. And
was
there
that
aren't many
all
in
your head?
world.
Like, was anyone else telling you weren't doing a good job?
No, all in my head.
So it's
all in my
internal.
own head. All in my own head.
Yeah.
And which I've always been a little bit. I've always been not great with my confidence. I was the kid in school who had to put his hand up, who couldn't put his hand up in class to ask a question. I was that terrified to ask a stupid question.
Yeah, now you do it for a living.
Exactly. Yeah. Part of my job, I feel like, in the commentary is to ask the basic questions because, especially for a 5 Live audience, you're not always going to get an active F1 fan. You might get a sports fan who knows a bit, but you've got to kind of explain, well, hang on, how does DRS work? That kind of thing. That might not always be the case on Sky Sports F1, but I do feel there is always a place for that because you're getting new people all the time. You don't know who's watching or listening. So yeah, that was all in my head, and I didn't have a contract or anything like that. And this business is very similar, media, broadcasting. It's political. You don't know how long you're going to have your job for. And at the end of the day, it is kind of performance based at the same time. And as a commentator, you feel a big responsibility to do the sport you love justice.
Yeah.
And so that was all just weighing on me massively.
And so, that just builds and builds because each one of those little things you've described feeds into a story that's in your own head. You start filling in the gaps in that story. It becomes bigger and more powerful, all in a generally negative sense from what you're saying. How do you turn that around, right? Because you've obviously continued. You're I think it's fair to say, on a bit of an upward trajectory at the moment. So things have gone well. Internally, how did you make that switch? How did you overcome that? Did you overcome it?
I think I did overcome it. I think I did have words with myself, almost out loud, like, "Come on, Harry, get a grip."
What, just quietly at home?
Just quietly at home, or watching back or listening to something and actually listening back to a few moments and going, actually, you know what? That wasn't that bad. And, then I'd get a couple of nice comments from people who I knew, who, whether they're friends or family, but, people who I thought, okay, that's actually, they're not just saying that to fluff me up. They enjoyed that coverage. So that kind of intertwined with giving myself a bit of a jolt and just kind of realizing, you've been asked to do this job for a reason. You're not just there to make up the numbers. There aren't many commentators. There aren't many commentator jobs. They could have picked somebody else, but they've gone with you. So there must be a reason behind that. So that you just kind of had to keep telling myself that really. And I clung on for dear life and I still cling on. But I do have that sort of, is it pessimism? Is it a reality check where, well, this could be it. That could be my lot. And there's almost only so much you can do because at the end of the day, it is kind of out of your hands.
Yeah, to some extent, of course it is. And I think inherently we all have a sort of negativity bias. It's much easier to think these negative thoughts as a potential out because it protects you from when the inevitable in your mind failure actually comes. You're like, well, yeah, I knew that was coming, so it's fine.
Yeah.
But in reality, do you, if you've still got that now, I guess I understand we all have a bit of that bubbling under. It's the imposter syndrome, isn't it, that kicks into all of us at times. So how, if you've got that bubbling under, it would be very easy to jump onto social media, which you say you do, see a negative comment where someone says you've been rubbish, you were rubbish, what are you talking about? That feeds back into that story, and it can very quickly escalate back to a place of being pretty low again, right? So are you aware of that more now so that you can stop it happening?
I am. I mean, I think lots of people have imposter syndrome, don't they? And I think when you go into a high profile job, you're going to get that to the max.
Yeah.
Sky, for instance, were amazing at sort of making sure I kept protected in that first round. They didn't want to open me up to too much sort of online comments. They were very positive in the production meetings, making sure I was okay, having even just, making sure I knew where we were having dinner that night, that kind of thing, making sure I was firmly embedded in the team and I knew they all had my back straight from the beginning. Karud even made a point of, let's have a practice session beforehand before we even go out to Imola. So that went a long way to making me feel sort of safe and secure. But in the everyday, I think again, the more it happens, the more you just learn to deal with it. But I think part of it is I just have a fake it till you make it kind of attitude. What's the worst that can happen? I know inherently that I'm good at what I'm doing. I'm not the best, and I'm constantly learning and improving. And I say that to myself all the time. I would never call myself the best. I would always say, well, look, it was a good job. I'm happy with that. But with every one, I do better and get better. And I think that's quite natural. And I'm in a fortunate position where, it has happened a bit quickly and I'm young. So I can learn from the likes of yourself. But working with Martin Brundle, Jolyon Palmer, Andrew Benson, all these people who have been in the sport for decades, longer than I have. And if I'm having an active conversation with them on a podcast or on a commentary and they're engaged and we're having good conversation, that to me gives me a massive confidence boost to know that what I'm saying isn't complete and utter rubbish. So that spurs me on every time I do it. Sometimes I do say complete and utter rubbish and I'll get called up for it, which is fair enough. We all do. Yeah. So I think it is just more and more experience as you go. But, I think part of me just goes, it's Formula One. This is broadcasting, it's entertainment. This isn't brain surgery. My dad, it was actually a retired brain surgeon. So I don't know what it's like to do a brain surgery, but I know sort of how high intensity of a job that is.
There was a little Formula One link there as well, wasn't there?
Yeah. So, I had no connections with motorsport or media, no route in, when I was 17, 18, apart from when my dad said that when he first started, his boss essentially was Sid Watkins. And I believe there was some sort of conversation where Sid asked him to come to all the races with him and be his kind of junior. But my dad had no interest in motorsport Formula One. He was starting to have a family, wanted to stay in London. So I was like, oh, what could have been?
So that's former F1 doctor Sid Watkins, for those who don't know. But yeah, exactly what could have been. But look what is. You still found a way here without that little step up. So I'm kind of interested when we're talking about this, the journey getting into Formula One and getting into motorsport. As you said, it was a bit of a dream, and particularly Formula One you thought you would never achieve. As you did start to break in and get these opportunities, first of all, how were you kind of received? Because you're a very young guy, particularly back then, well-established industry where there aren't many roles in the job you're doing. 2 or 3, I guess, in each country, probably no more than that. So how hard was it to actually break in? How welcoming was the community? What surprised you when you got to Formula One?
Obviously, very hard to break in. I started in Porsche Super Cup. I haven't just rocked in at F1 level. I started doing the Porsche Super Cup in 2021. And that was off the back of sending an email the year previously on a whim to Formula One management, the people who do Porsche F3, F2, F1 TV. Off the back of that, I had a phone call with them, and then I got invited to Biggin Hill and shown round, and then I sent them a really rough showreel of me commentating an old Super Cup race because they had asked me, "Can you do any commentary?" Of which I had done none at the time, and I just went, "Yeah, sure." That's the other thing. Say yes and worry about it later.
Good advice.
That's my mantra as well. But I was like, oh my God, I need to find a Porsche race and start commentating it. But also then you realize I don't know any of these drivers. How on earth am I going to start? Thankfully for Super Cup, they had the driver name written massive letters on the windscreen. So that always helps. And I started just watching them, plugged in a microphone into my laptop at home and would try practicing my commentary from my bedroom. And I couldn't even do a full lap. I was running out of breath. I couldn't get the intonation right. I didn't know what was the right thing to be focusing on. I was just all over the shop. But I managed to cobble 4 minutes together to send to Formula One. And then about a month prior to the season starting, they said, "Can you do the Super Cup commentary?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. Love it." And I was in, and that was the foot in the door. That led to an opportunity to do Formula 3 the following year. I covered an F2 race as well. I was in the building, and then I got an F1 TV opportunity the year after, alongside doing 5 lives in 2022, because they were looking for a cover commentator. And I suppose I was the next one down on the list, essentially, doing F3. So they tried me out. They were very careful to go, "Yeah, they've got 3 races. Let's see how you go for the first one, and then we'll see." So they weren't just giving it to me on a plate.
Yeah.
So that was sort of, in short, the kind of journey up through the ranks of Formula One, like a driver, road to F1. And so the F1 opportunities were bubbling away, but there was no main door that I could see myself getting in. So I was just having to think about what else I could do. Could I go off and do something else? Or I'm a big DTM fan, or what was the DTM, WEC fan. I was a runner in Formula E in the early days as well, making the teas and coffees. So I was always keeping an eye on that championship. And then I got an opportunity to step up and take over from around the Monaco race in 2022. I think everyone knows the reasons why. And that was my sort of, okay, I'll go to the end of the season. And it was a steep learning curve to suddenly having to do F1 races week in, week out. And okay, fine, when you're doing 3 or 4 a year, you've got loads of time to prep. But then suddenly it's, oh my God, okay, we're straight on to Canada, right? Okay, here we go. Or I'm actually going to this race. Brilliant, because we do a lot of them remotely now. So it was a lot to learn. And the political landscape is a massive factor as well. You know, I've learned along the way that I think there aren't that many jobs in broadcasting as a whole, and it is a competitive environment. And I've been made aware of some sort of attempts to kind of stop me from progressing up the ladder. So
from people within the industry.
Yeah. So, you know, which is, I'm not gonna throw them under the bus. I'm not gonna hold them to it. But luckily, you know, I like to think that actually I can prove to my employers, whoever they might be, that I'm a good commentator. I'm a nice person to work with, which I think goes above and beyond anything else, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And in a way, is it part of the game? I don't know, but it was it highlighted how I think I was quite naive coming into the sport in Formula One, not realizing. We talk about the politics on track all the time, but there is a lot of politics in general in life, as we know. Yeah. So that was something I had to get on top with. But you know what? I wasn't aware of it until after it all happened anyway. So that's probably quite a good thing. Really?
And it didn't stop you.
Thankfully.
But did you ever think of it as that must be then, if somebody's trying to do something to stop you, it's because I'm posing a threat. And do you ever turn that into sort of positive, in that I must be doing something right if someone's willing to go to the lengths of trying to stop me? You know what I mean?
I mean, maybe. It's just an honor to be like working with some of these people. Like, you know, Crofty, for instance, we had a half an hour phone conversation after Imola for some advice. And he was, you know, giving me some of the things that he did when he was first starting out, because he used to be on 5 Live as well. Yeah, so it's quite a nice sort of similar story. And so Crofty was very kind of, you know, make sure you do this. And you know, here's how I get the best out of Martin, for instance. And I was quite nervous about working with Martin Brundle, because obviously he is a legend of the sport. And that's, if anyone's the voice of Formula One for me, it's Martin Brundle. Yeah. So to get a kind of insider scoop for Crofty to take the time to have a phone call with me meant the absolute world.
That is really good, isn't it?
And everybody else within that team, and obviously the 5 Live team, and the FOM team when I was doing F3, they were so brilliant in letting me go, because I had to leave F3 in the middle of the season to go and take up 5 Live full time, essentially. Yeah. Which was a big issue, because I'd given my commitment to Formula 3, and I didn't want to throw anything under the bus or leave any awkwardness hanging. But you know what? They were so brilliant in understanding that, well, you've been handed a Formula 1 opportunity here, and we can't give you that at the moment. So you know, go. And I was so grateful and brilliant for that. So there have been a lot. On the whole, it's been incredibly encouraging. But politics is Formula One, and Formula One is politics, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And I think it is a great community, and it's generally, as you say, very welcoming. I think everyone has an understanding within this Formula One world that only other people in the Formula One world really get what we all do, because it's such a bubble, isn't it? And particularly if you're traveling to all the races, you're so disconnected from the real world that you've got this shared experience that only other people in that paddock have. So I think there's a general welcoming in the most part from that. When you do get into this opportunity, and I mean, first of all, we'll talk about why the opportunities, or how you were ready for the opportunities, because the opportunities came along. The 5 Live one almost came out of the blue, but you were ready for it. That's important. So we'll talk about that. But also, when you did get there, you're now immersed in a world, as I said earlier on, that's quite established. A lot of people have been there a very long time. You're this young gun that's come in. How did you find a way to integrate yourself? You said you were quite sort of shy, I guess, or lacking in confidence. You've now got to go into a world full of sort of elite level people, very good at their jobs, that you might have even idolized many of them in the past. You've got to go and immerse yourself in that. So let's talk about, first of all, how were you ready for the opportunities when they came? And then when you got there, how did you embrace that massive challenge of just immersing yourself in a world like that?
So my first 5 Live opportunity, well, that was obviously with you back in 2022. And I got the phone call for that a couple of months prior, which was funny because I'd just been doing a commentary with John Watson, of all people, doing some GT race. So I got the call then. But I felt ready for that because I'd been the runner for 5 Live years ago, making the teas and coffees again. I was doing Formula 3. I felt ready. And actually, after that commentary, Jenny Gow, who was the pit lane reporter for that race, said to me, how did you feel after that? And I went, actually, I felt good. I felt like I was ready for it. I felt like I could do it. And I was so happy with it. I look back on it now and go, oh, that was a bit rusty. Or why did you say it like that? But at the time, I felt like I was ready. I could do it. And I was nervous, up all night, couldn't sleep. But I did it and I felt I was confident and ready. And then obviously that developed. The Sky F1 opportunity came about initially through doing the F1 Kids broadcast, the first ever one. And that was kind of being billed to me, at least, not by Sky, by other people. It was like, this is your audition. And I was like, don't say that, please. But, in the back of your head, you're always auditioning, really. You don't know who's listening to you or who's watching you, wherever that may be.
That's kind of a point, right? You've always got to be ready, because these opportunities do spring seemingly out of nowhere. But unless even if in your subconscious, unless you're somehow ready or think you're ready, preparing yourself, you obviously do a lot of preparation anyway, but you had to be ready when it came along. Yeah.
But you know what? Half the battle is, I knew at that stage that I can commentate a race. I can read a race. I can call a race. That's not the issue. There are ways of fine-tuning that all the time, and that to me will come race by race, and I'll always be improving that. Fine. But the other half is working with the people in your team. That is over half the battle, as far as I'm concerned. I think if you're nice and easy to work with, you'll be asked back. You could be the best person for the job ever, but if you're not that great to work with, actually, if I'm in charge, I'm going to pick the guy that's maybe not as good as you, but is so much easier to work with. That's who I'm going to go with. And so I'm always so careful to make sure that I'm getting on with everybody, not forcing it or faking it, but teamwork, I know it's cringy, it does make the dream work. And without your team, you are nothing. And I felt so backed up by the whole Sky team. And I felt like I was infringing on them because they've been together for so long. They're a family. And I felt like I was coming in. I felt a bit like an outsider. And that lessened my confidence. But over the years, I've learned that actually you just kind of have to, something within you, and maybe it's the acting that comes in here, you just have to exude a little bit of confidence. Don't be afraid to say something and ask a silly question, because you actively participating will encourage others to participate with you, and for them to go, oh, he's not just some mute on the end. He's actually actively wanting to engage and learn, or trying not to sort of say full-on statements or give too much of an opinion, but trying to learn how a new team operates and their mechanisms. And very much, I suppose, like it is in a Formula One team when you're coming into it and we're making a pit stop where together, when we go into the production meetings at Sky, they've been doing them for years. They follow a pretty set format. I'd never done a production meeting like that before. So I was just kind of trying to learn what are they asking? Why are we doing this? What can I add? Do I actually need to say anything? Because you don't always need to speak. I think that's another powerful thing as well. You don't always need to say something for the sake of saying it. But I think if you exude your own kind of confidence, no matter how that comes about, whether it's just you're pretending to be a slightly enlarged form of yourself, then that will come back and then some to you.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there. I think the idea of, well, first of all, you're right, it's exactly the same in a Formula One team. And even racing drivers in Formula One have been chosen largely based on what they're like to work with, as opposed to just how quick they are. So those things really matter. Nico Rosberg always said to me, one of these best bits of advice that he got given, which was by Frank Williams, I think, he said, you always meet somebody twice. And he's talking about, don't burn bridges. So it's like,
I was always told, don't be a dick.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah. It's right, isn't it? When you leave a job or you leave a position and you move on somewhere else, in the same way that you sort of left the F3 thing to go for Formula One, you don't chuck a grenade over your shoulder. You leave on good terms and be a good guy. That's the main thing. The second thing was this idea of asking questions there's no such thing as a stupid question. And we always said this in the Formula One team, there is no such thing as a stupid question in a debrief or in a briefing, because there will be other people around you lacking in a little bit of confidence who also don't know what someone else is talking about, but are not brave enough to pop their hand up and say it. And so when one person says it, you're actually normally helping 2 or 3 other people around you because they weren't quite clear either. So this idea of just speaking up and asking a question, no matter, as I said, it's not stupid, so valuable to you, but also to other people.
Yeah, massively. And also, I suppose that's within sort of internally too, but externally, it's part of our job is also to ask questions to drivers and things like that. In Azerbaijan this year, I went along to the FIA press conference that they do before the weekend.
Yeah.
And because nobody else from Sky was going, and I was like, well, I've never asked a question. I've actually hosted the press conference. I've never asked a question before. So I thought this would be, I sort of said to myself, this will be a good thing for you to do because you won't get this opportunity all the time. And there weren't many people in the Azerbaijan press conference room. So the pressure was a little bit off. So I asked a question to Oliver Behrman and he gave me a nice response, and that filled me with a bit of confidence. I was like, okay, we're going. And then I had a bit of a spicy question for Fernando Alonso. Now, this is perhaps my naivety coming in here, and maybe I was trying to be I was biting off more than I could chew at that stage. Overconfident. And I was asking him, I wanted his opinion on the team order situation at McLaren. Because he'd been at McLaren, he's been on the back end of team orders and the right end. He knows Andrea Stella very well. And I just thought you'd be a great guy to give just some opinions on it. And I had my question kind of rehearsed and written out. I'd even discussed it with some of the Sky lot. And go, do you think that's all right? I'm not being too... And in the back of my head, I was like, he could absolutely palm me off on this one. But I'm going to do it anyway, because who knows? Ask my question, a little bit of a pause, and Fernando just goes, no idea. And that's all I get. And bless Tom Clarkson, he tried to G him up and give a bit more, but he was just not having any of it. And I was like, oh, God, that is a punch in the gut.
You can take it as a feather in your cap to be shut down by Fernando Alonso.
Well, I tell you what, Andrew Benson texted me straight away and he was just like, welcome to the club. And I felt honoured. And I was like, you know what? But you know what? Now I look at it, that was a massive learning experience. And maybe there was actually a way I could have worded that question better that he would have answered it. Or maybe I shouldn't have just asked that question at all and gone in with something different or posed it to somebody else on that lineup. But, at the time you're laughing, you feel like you're going red in the face. That doesn't change. You still feel like you've just been punched in the stomach. Yeah. But also, no one died. It was, I walked away, had a bit of a laugh with the PR guy afterwards, going, well, I just got Alonso'd or whatever, That's part of the game. And it was a big learning experience for me. And, I might not sit in a press conference until next year now, but at least I've got that as a notch in my building of air miles.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also that idea of always reflecting back and saying, well, how bad really is it? No matter what happens to you, when you do get a knock, and it could be more serious than that, or something that feels more serious. It's always, if you always go back and ask, just how bad is this? Did someone die? How is it really serious? Most of the time it isn't, is it? It's internally, you build it into something enormous. The reality is not many other people care, and it's not going to really change the course of your life.
Yeah. I mean, look, at the end of the day, you can't have that attitude for, I suppose, everything in life, but you've got to be professional and serious and be good at the job at the same time. But equally in those scenarios, I think that's when that kind of method carries weight. But equally, I think my mindset changed massively when my mum passed away when in 2018. So, but way before I was doing any Formula One stuff. I was still at university at the time. I wasn't doing anything broadcasting wise. And she was diagnosed with a brain tumor and died a year and a bit later. Awful, and that was a traumatic experience, which I still carry with me to this day. And you don't get over something like that. You just sort of learn to live with it. But that, I remember the day after, I was just ready to drop out of uni, chuck it all in. What's the point anymore? That was my mindset. Very quickly changed that, because that's the last thing my mum would want me to be doing, having put in all this effort. But with that kind of mindset in mind, if you're willing to kind of work hard at it, enjoy what you're doing, and realizing that actually I could walk out after this podcast recording into the middle of the road and be hit by a bus, and then then what? And then that's it, or something worse than that can happen. And that is always in the back of my mind when I think about it. And I don't think that will ever go. And maybe I'm on the extreme end of the dial on that front because I've had this experience. But I that's, to me, trying to build that into a more positive experience as I go forward is what I try to do, at least. And I think if she could see what I'm doing right now, I think it'd be quite cool. So on the same side, it's gutting that she will never see this, but on the other side, I try and carry that way of thinking in, okay, this is if this doesn't work out, there will be another way forward.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure, I'm sure she was an influential part of why you're sitting here right now talking about yourself as an F1 commentator. Yeah. So everything she instilled in you, I'm sure, will have been part of this journey, and will also be the same part of something that happens beyond this if this doesn't work out, for example. If you do get hit by the bus outside.
Yeah. The number 405, I think it is. Yeah.
What do you want to be remembered as, or how do you want to be remembered? Does it matter to you? Because you're obviously, in a growing sense, in the public eye now. You broadcast to many millions of people, sometimes on television as well. So you must at some point, and particularly I'm thinking go all the way back to your sort of acting training, you must be creating, even if subconsciously, a version of yourself that the world sees. Hopefully it's very close to the real you. I think it is. But how do you want people to, or how do you think people will remember you if you do get hit by the bus?
I think they'll remember me as Harry Benjamin, sexologist, died at 106 years old.
That's what they'll find when they Google.
Because that will still be the top link. I don't know. I mean, that's a big question. I'm not sure. I'm known as that guy. Oh, you're the guy that did that there for a couple of F1 races, right? And you know what? That's good enough for me. Happy with that. But at the same time, I'm not doing it to be remembered in any way. I'm doing it all for myself, because I can't. As far as I'm concerned, any other kind of job route it was out of the question. I had no. This was the backup to acting, believe it or not. And so if I can, if someone can say, oh, he was an F1 commentator. That's pretty cool, because there aren't many of them over the years, and to be a part of the crop is an honor. It really is, and that's that'll probably be it, because legacy is that I'm not sure I really care about that, if I'm brutally honest, because I'm not going to be here to enjoy the legacy. So I want to sort of live in the moment, which again sounds cringy. It's what you're taught in drama school quite a lot, is to be present and be in the moment. And I'm not always in the moment and present. A lot of people aren't, but at least I have it in the back of my mind to jolt myself into just enjoying this feeling at the moment. Actually, I'll tell you what, everyone in that first Sky F1 commentary told me, are you enjoying it? Are you enjoying it though? And I was like, yeah. Wasn't enjoying it at all. I was nervous the whole weekend. I was like, I'll enjoy it once it's over, once I can breathe and I've done the job.
Yeah.
And then it was great. And I look back on it and God, I've got a buzz from doing that. And then the next ones, I enjoyed every minute of it. Baku was amazing. Living in the moment of that one. Austria with Martin Brundle, I could live in the moment for that one. So I think you can be forgiven for not always being present. But hopefully that gives a little bit of an example.
Yeah.
So I think, to come back to your question, I don't really care.
No, it's fair enough. I think a lot of people. The reason I've asked the question is I'm writing a chapter on legacy in my second book at the moment. So I've been exploring it quite a lot. I find it really quite an interesting concept because a lot of people think of it as a sort of a note towards death. Like it's only something that happens after death. Feels a bit dark. Like I don't want to think about legacy because that means I've died or whatever. Whereas actually what I've uncovered in all my research for this is that actually it's much more about life and living, because the way you're living your life right now, and you've touched on it earlier on, being a nice guy, making sure that you're doing your job in the best way possible, you're speaking to the millions of people, trying to talk them through an F1 race, something that they will be as passionate about as you were when you were a kid listening to Brundle and Murray Walker. So the way you're living your life now is creating the legacy, whether you like it or not. And you don't have to be, a lot of people think of it as arrogance. I want people to think of me this way afterwards. It doesn't have to be like that. It can be all about the here and now. And your legacy is just a consequence of the way you live today. So if the reason what I'm saying is, if you think about legacy in a way, not as something that happens after death, but something that's happening right now, I find it a nice way to guide the way I live in a much more positive sense today.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I suppose, I'd rather be, if people refer to me in whatever capacity, slag me off, whatever. But, if coming back to the working with the people who you do and enjoying it and having fun and being a nice person, that is it, actually. That is what if someone's going to say, he was good to work with or whatever, that's the better thing. Because I know so many people, my friends, similar ages, who they hate their jobs, or they don't know what they want to do and they don't know what direction they want to go in. And here I am sort of living this very different life, and I enjoy every minute. I can't wait to go to Austin, because part of me is like, we've got the F1 race, but we'll be with the team again, and we've got a big team out in Austin. It's going to be loads of fun, and I'm going to enjoy every minute. And if you're enjoying it, then that will reflect in what you do in the professional sense.
Totally.
And each one feeds the other, and then it all ends up nice and rosy, hopefully.
Yeah, and the reality is that in the same way that the Murray Walkers, the Brundles, and whoever else, their legacy, even though Brundle's still going, they've still got a legacy, because when you were a kid, you grew up listening and watching these people, and it must have inspired in some way the moment you're in right now. There'll be kids in years to come who look at and listen to your voice and recognize it, and it'll be exactly the same process, won't it? You are creating a legacy. We all are, every step of the way we go. So thinking about that in terms of how we live today, I think is a really positive thing. I want to bring this to a close, but one more topic I really wanted to cover was this idea of communication, which kind of underpins everything you do, right? Broadcasting is communication, on television, radio, whatever. And it all comes back, I'm sure, to that training that you must have had in the first career you thought you were going to have in drama school. Surely that was a really important part of training to be a drama student.
Yeah.
How important is communication? And even though that was in a completely different field back then, how much use have you found all that today?
Oh, it's the basis of my life in general. I would say everyone should do some sort of drama course, because it sets you up for life. Because we would do these, this is on the extreme side of it, but part of our lesson was we did animal studies, and we'd have to go and study an animal for a bit and then reenact how that animal communicated and moved, and then how could that feed into the way we walk. Or
I'd love to see that.
I had my animal was an anteater, so I'll show you that after. But also we'd have then go away. Your homework is to find somewhere and sit for a couple of hours and just watch people and make notes and see how people walk differently or carry themselves. If you carry yourselves quite heavily with your chest, that's actually going to affect the way you speak. And if you've got your head held high, that might actually make you feel better. All these small things that go a long way into how you live your everyday life. As a tall person, I'm 6'5". Even standing on the tube, I'm trying to make myself as small as possible, because I'm aware I'm taking up a lot of room. But one of the first things I was told was to own your space, because you cannot help the fact that you are 6'5". Nothing I can do about that. And so I'm entitled to the space that I naturally take up. And so if you're able to stand your ground and don't be annoying about it, obviously there comes a limit, but you can own your space, and in real life sets you up for everything, where you speak, how you're using your diaphragm. I still do little kind of vocal warm-ups before I do a commentary, because how else am I gonna get my mouth around all the words that I've got to say? I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth. And then it does just come back to inherently having a bit of confidence to talk. And that confidence wasn't always there. It grew over time from meeting more people, from meeting people that were well outside of my social circle that I wouldn't automatically mix with, and also not being good at it in the first place, I think, and actually having to put in the work and realizing that you can learn to be something. You can have a natural talent, but you also can learn and develop as a person. And with that, communication skills that I was being taught, how to stand, how to get the best out of my voice, whether that's through general vocal or singing even too, all of that just kind of snowballed into one big factor.
Yeah.
And I think I still use it inherently to this day. So even though at the end of that first week where I said, no, this is not for me, I still got more out of that course than probably anybody else on that drama school course, because I knew that would set me up for how I broadcast on the radio, and being able to meet guests who I did not know and be able to interact with them and put them at ease. If their communication skills weren't as great as mine, you can almost give them some reassurance. If you're confident enough, you can reassure others and elevate whatever you do.
It's so true, isn't it? It's at the heart of everything. There isn't a career out there which doesn't rely on communication to be better at it. Everything, every interaction we have, it's forms of communication. There are lots of forms of it, but it's interesting, isn't it, that all those years ago, training for something completely different has been so central to, as you said, your whole life. Yeah. I think it's key to relationships, to business, and very obviously the job you've ended up doing. But I think this has been an amazing conversation, and I've taken loads of stuff. I think the real big messages that have come out of this that jump out for me are this idea of being ready for whenever an opportunity comes along, and that is preempted by the preparation, the active preparation. I think for everybody at home, you don't know when these opportunities are going to emerge. You may not even know what type of opportunity is going to come along, but it doesn't mean you still can't be prepared. And that can just be being prepared for the unexpected. It's so that it doesn't surprise you. I think that's a really important thing. The idea of being a good person, in any industry is not always on your job description, but it's one of the most important things that should be. I think that's also, really strong advice. And finding your way in a world that was already very established, elite in itself, with only a few, roles in the one you were going for, I think is testament to the kind of person you've become and you've grown into, and also that preparation, because you couldn't have done it. And if the opportunity had come along and you weren't prepared, you would have fallen away. This is an industry where you are measured by your performance. And even though internally you've struggled to kind of get to grips with how good you think, you are internally, but I think externally it's shown in the opportunities that continue to come your way. So it's been a pleasure to have you on the show, mate. I always enjoy commentating with you. So thank you very much. And I look forward to Austin as well.
Thank you, Mark. I look forward to it as well. Thanks for having me on. I've not given up on acting, by the way. Plans to do Strictly Come Dancing, maybe 6 to 7 years, and then that's the route to the West End. So,
fantastic.
Yeah.
And I look forward to, maybe we'll put it online, the version of the Anteater.
Yes. And my backup song.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, Mark.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that chat with Harry. He's always a pleasure to be alongside. It was great fun. I think you'll have picked up on that, but also some wonderful advice. His journey is such a unique one. He's so young in a sport populated by really established and very experienced people, yet he's fitted in perfectly. I hope you took a lot from it. This is actually the last one in this current series. I hope you've really enjoyed it. I cannot thank you enough for all of the interactions, the engagement that you've given the podcast in this particular run, the likes, the subscribing, and all of the comments. I appreciate all of it. I would love that to continue. Don't worry, this isn't the end of it. We are preparing another series in the background of this one right now as we speak, with loads more guests. We would love to know who you'd like to feature on the next series. And until then, in the meantime, as ever, don't forget this. Do the right things, do the things right.